Welcome everyone to episode 3 of
Woo!
JourneyCast.
Episode 3. Welcome
I'm
back.
Levi.
I'm Alicia.
And with us today is the executive director of Whispering Pines Camp, Denver Knodel. Denver, how are you doing?
Woo!
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Good. Denver, how long have you been? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Tell you about myself.
What do you do? What is it? What's being the executive director of Whispering Pines Camp actually look like?
Okay, so being the executive director, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah, what do I do?
I kind of do.
a good question.
I'm kind of responsible for everything. So if there's like a decision,
Yeah.
well, right now, especially if there's a decision to be made, I have to kind of make that decision. And
You have to make an executive decision.
make an executive decision, yeah, and make sure that like the things that the camp is doing, the activities that are happening there, are like all kind of happening in a way that makes sense with how our organization wants to do things. Because I don't work independently. I actually, I'm the one who's in charge of everything that happens at camp, but there's actually a group of people that are in charge of me, and that's our like board of directors and
your
those
board governed.
Yeah.
So it's all administrative work out there. There's nothing else you do.
Oh goodness. Yeah. I make all the decisions. So who is going to be our cook? Who are we going to ask to be the cook? And
How
what
short
kind
will
of
the
oil
grass
are we going
be?
to put in the skid steer and the
Which
equipment
trees get to
and-
live?
Yeah, that's right. How far we cut our trails.
You were making those
and
decisions before you were the executive director, though.
practicing.
I remember-
had practice. Yeah.
I remember we'd go on hikes, and hopefully we don't get in trouble for this. We'd go on hikes in Elkwater, and do you remember tree tipping? Yeah.
You push over the dead trees.
Yeah, we just find it was, and to be fair, they were already dead, and then we just go up and tree tip.
As long as you're close to a trail, it's helpful.
Yeah,
If you have to
we're
go
actually helping.
If you have to go too far, because
Like
you don't want
the-
like a tree to fall over. I had somebody come camping at the camp.
Yeah.
And they like took a look at the site where they were going to camp, and then they like went around, and before they like backed in, they went and they like pushed on all of the trees around.
That's actually a really smart idea.
Yeah. And then nothing, to make sure that nothing was going to like
You don't want a tree falling on your trailer in the middle of the night.
or you
Or a kid,
That's
yeah.
or anything.
Yeah,
really,
anything at all that's not supposed to have a tree fall on it. Yeah.
I was just
there are
thinking
limits.
it's kind of like the wilderness version of cow tipping for country
It is.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of trees, so we
Except
can tip
these trees are dead.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, so it's better, really.
Yeah, it is really better.
better.
We were doing
It's a good thing.
Elkwater a favor by tree tipping.
Did a good service.
Yeah.
Woodpeckers, maybe not so happy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I could still peck it when it's on the ground.
that's right. Can't live in it down there.
Yeah.
So we love camps. We love going out to camps. We're preparing to go out to Youth Retreat, hang out with you guys soon.
Yes.
We love the atmosphere out there. We love the calmness of it, getting away from it all. And so what a fitting topic then to talk a little bit about anxiety, because I think that actually goes hand in hand with getting away from it all or
Yes.
taking on too much.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that today.
Yeah.
You went out to a conference recently, you were mentioning before we started, that had a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you took away from that?
Oh, so I was at a conference for like camp people
Yeah.
in Alberta, and it was a couple of days, and it was cool to get to, connect with other people who do kind of the same thing and have similar experiences. And so we had a session where we had it was kind of like a discussion around our tables. And so you would sit with a bunch of people that you don't necessarily know and don't work with, and you would discuss ideas. And so this session was talking about wellness, the idea of wellness, and what does that look like? So physical wellness, spiritual wellness, emotional wellness, like health. The health of your whole person is kind of like wellness. And so we talked about some of the important parts of that. And my wife Julie and I would just we keep in touch with people that we've known through being involved here at youth and through our camp, and just friends of ours. And we've just been noticing that there are a lot of people in our lives right now that we know closely and not very closely that seem to be wrestling so much with anxiety, and even just you know, in the course of doing camp, you notice it too, that people are a lot more just struggling a lot more with day-to-day life. And it's like, you know, it's kind of across the board in all areas, and you know, it's not one particular type of person or the other. It's like just a lot of people are really struggling. And
there's
so
not like one common denominator. You're like, oh, this is the reason you're struggling.
Yeah. There's, you know, there are people who have like, you know, had like mental health challenges over the past while, and they're going through it. And there's people that have had, you know, emotional stuff and family stuff go on. That's really challenging. And then there's other people that haven't had any of that are they just really are kind of on edge, unsettled, and like have a hard time managing their emotions on a day-to-day basis, and managing their ability to self-motivate and kind of guide themselves like that. And it's, you know, and so like on one hand it's like, well, like it's crazy that this is such a widespread thing right now. But on the other hand, it's like, well, it's good because like if somebody's experiencing that, you can say, look, like you're not alone in going through that. It's not like there's something wrong with you that you're having this experience. It's just,
and that might be part of it too, right? Is people are just more comfortable about talking about it. Maybe like maybe that's part of it.
Yeah.
But I also think this is the most anxious generation we've ever had.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like I think anxiety's always been a part of life.
Oh yeah.
But I think in recent years, it's just become like, I know very few people who don't struggle with anxiety anymore, right? It's become something so prevalent.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, it's always been a thing for sure. And that's like the thing, like there's maybe a bit more contrast because people didn't understand why they felt the way they did. There's a lot more knowledge behind it, but also there's been at the same time an influx of more people experiencing it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different factors involved in
absolutely.
like in the rising levels of like anxiety being reported and I think, you know, one of the biggest things that, you know, as I was discussing with other people at this conference and just processing it myself, is like the rise in like individualism as like an identity.
Right.
And like, just for context, I would guess it would be like contrasting the idea of like, you know, being the unit that you belong to, the unit of community that you belong to for like a long time. And in a lot of cultures is like your family or your region or your town or whatever. And in our culture, we've shifted so far away from that, from, you know, being identified with people in our area and being involved or being identified with people in our family or people in our like, you know, immediate community. And we're so defined by ourselves that it seems like because of how defined by ourselves we are, we become isolated from others, and there's more rise in behaviors that like isolate ourselves. You know, you think of like rising rates of separation in families. You know, how many families do you know where both parents are present and in the picture, and in, you know, that relationship is emotionally healthy, and like if that's not emotionally healthy, who wants to be, you know, associated and defined by that, you know, and just things like that, where as we, you know, distance ourselves from others, we also are, you know, I think in a lot of ways distancing ourselves from healthy coping mechanisms, right? One of the things we talked about in the sessions was just about you know, what actually does increase wellness. And so many people that I was talking to were saying that, you know, people will share with us ways that we can encourage them, and then we share that with their peers that they're working with or serving with at camps. And when people are finding that when they're serving others like when your peers are, trying to do something positive for you and support you and encourage you, that they themselves are feeling supported and encouraged and experiencing more peace. And I think that there's something really important about that like we are very much like communal people, communal.
We're designed for relationship.
Beings. Yeah, we're designed for relationship. And so the more we move towards an individual identity, the harder it becomes for us to, I think, maintain the kind of community relationships that help us to feel fulfilled and connected and supported. We very quickly begin to feel very isolated, and we feel very disconnected from others and disconnected from things that can actually help us to cope.
This is awesome. I've been thinking about this so much. Like, you're speaking out some of the things I've been reading, and I'm like, oh, this is exactly what's been on my mind. So I've just been I've been reading a lot about like exactly what you're saying. And a lot of what's jumping out is that like we don't think about idol worship anymore. We're like, we don't have like a wooden figurine in our house that we worship, right? So like we don't really think
There's
so
no
much
golden
about those
calves.
things. Yeah. But what, for example, could be modern day idol worship, and one of those things is actually the worship of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think, if we
Because there's a difference between self-confidence and a difference between worshiping yourself. Like, those are different things.
Oh yeah, but I think our culture is really saying focus more on yourself.
Yeah.
Like if you look at anything, right? Because you're talking about self-care. Like everything out there about self-care is like, who are you? Spend more time alone. Spend more time pampering yourself. Like
Look
here's
out for
an easy
yourself.
fix. Like buy this outfit, you'll feel better. Or like do this meditation, you'll feel better. I'm like, there's all of these like really crazy, wacky things out there where they're like, focus more on yourself and more on yourself and more on yourself. Like, who
Post
are
this
you?
photo
And
on
take
Instagram so you
this
can get more
test.
likes.
And it's everything is so self-absorbed, and we keep telling ourselves that the more we focus on ourselves, the more we understand ourselves, the more that we take this time to really just pamper ourselves, that we'll be better, and then we won't feel anxious and we'll figure ourselves out. But the truth, and what you're saying, this is what I love about Jesus. I love Jesus so much. Everything that he teaches us is so opposite from what the world teaches us. We're like, wait, what? But really it's the opposite, because it's the more you focus on other people, the more that you serve, the more that you care for others, the more that you spend time listening to other people, even the more time you spend praying for other people instead of focusing so much on ourselves, like a lot of that starts to wash away, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I think, we need to, I'm really passionate about community. I think that building strong community is so important. And it is, I believe that's like such a core message within the gospel about, it gives such an importance to community, because it's not just like, community isn't just something we do in our spare time that sort of happens. It's like community in
It's not you surrounding yourself with people just so they entertain you.
No, exactly. There's like community in itself.
I find these people interesting, so I'm going to spend time with them.
Please feed me
And
grapes while you talk.
Yeah, they will entertain me.
That's right.
And that will fill me up.
That's right.
That's not what we're talking about.
But like a healthy community, a healthy sense of supportive community is like how we show to the world around us that actually Jesus is real and has real power.
That's difficult though now, isn't it? Because if we're all super individual, and I'm sure COVID didn't help with this, it's don't leave your room, right? So how do we encourage ourselves to take that step to be vulnerable with other people, or do life with other people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, this is just, I think we talked about a bit of this last week with Jeff, the two greatest commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second one, he says,
love others.
a second and equally important, love your neighbor as yourself. And then they go on to ask him, well, who is my neighbor? And then he talks about the Good Samaritan. Actually your neighbor is also the person that you don't like, that you don't get along with. And investing in community, but also encouraging people that you maybe necessarily don't get along with the best.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something really important about like identity when it comes to this. I think like when we ground our identity in like, or I guess the security of our identity is in like, you know, who Jesus is and how he loves us and supports us and cares for us. You know, and recognizing that, you know, once there's definitely a piece where it's like, you need to like recognize where, you know, the importance of what God has done and how real that is when it comes to stuff like your you know, emotional mental health. In order to like have the confidence to like, and the confidence and the security in your person to be okay being vulnerable. Yeah. And like recognizing that, you know, we can't have community without like vulnerability.
Yeah.
And
because those people don't know who you really are if you're just wearing a mask.
that's right. You
Just a person you're stuck in a room with.
yeah. You can't
And
have,
that's even more exhausting because you've put on this mask of who you want people to think you are.
that's right. Yeah.
And then you've got to do that all the time. Anytime you spend time with people,
Yeah.
you've got to put on this show.
Yeah. But like you can't have community without vulnerability, and vulnerability always brings with it like risk to yourself, right? Otherwise it's not actually really vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right. And that like this, I feel like the security to do that, to take that step comes from like recognizing like, okay, Jesus has got me no matter what. And that like us having community is so important. It's actually more important than me having security. And it's okay to feel like that lack of security or that like, you know, that challenge, that like, I guess that edge or that risk, right? But it's like, you know,
It can also be really rewarding.
yeah, exactly. The only way to like move forward and to grow is to actually kind of lean into that, you know, and say like, even if this doesn't go well, it's worth the risk to step out and try and build community through like authentic relationship.
This is one of the benefits of having youth group is that we meet together regularly and we have these small groups, right, that we get to be a part of. And, you know, ideally, I mean, if you're lucky enough, you come in grade 7 and you're building this community with your same leader, same friends for, you know, 6 years till you graduate, and it creates these real bonds, right? Like it's every week. Okay. And like, as you grow in trust with each other, being able to say like, hey, this is what's going on in my life right now. And it's really hard. And it's like a safe place to come every week and to share that. I think like being in a small group is the best, right?
Oh, yeah.
Your group has some really great community. You lead the grade, for those who don't know, the grade 10, 11 boys in our
And
youth
1-9.
group.
Do you want to give a
And
shout
1-9
out to
group.
them? Or?
Oh yes, I have to give a shout out to Ruben because he
okay.
asked for
a
one.
favorite one.
So,
Oh no.
Oh my gosh.
Shout out to Ruben.
Shout out to Ruben.
They're all my favorite,
Yeah.
but Ruben's the only
Ruben
one who
specifically asked.
asked. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Ask and you shall receive.
Classic Ruben. That doesn't surprise me.
He's so great.
Yeah, but like your group is already like wanting to do other things outside of youth. Like they're like, hey, we like each other well enough, and like learning about Jesus that we want to do this more than just Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
Like I think that's cool.
It is, and you know what? That's a real relationship. It's not just a like structure that has pushed them together. They've actually leaned into it.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like their relationship doesn't get there. I don't think it even gets there just by showing up over and over and over and over again. You actually like,
You have to be vulnerable.
They like, you know, they've been vulnerable with each other in different ways. And, you know, camp has been a big part of that. Like I've seen that happen at camp and in retreat settings and in times away that they've like, you know, they've engaged in a like very, different way. They're like open with their emotions and they're
Supporting each other,
right? And you don't get to have that like I know I love you and want to spend time with you unless you like are able to say I'm hurting, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part, is that like the way to like, one of the biggest ways to move through a experience of anxiety and a season of like just not being able to deal with your life is to have community, but it takes risk, which
Yeah.
feels really hard when you're experiencing that. But
Yeah.
but you know, all we can do is kind of like, you know, we get to stand on the sidelines as like youth leaders and youth pastors and teachers, is like to like stand on the sidelines and say, you know, go for it, take the risk.
Yep.
You will grow even if it doesn't go well.
Yes, that's true.
Because it's not always going to go well, but like you'll always grow and become better as a result of being willing to step out in faith and in trust. In
So what
other
about the
people.
kids who are super introverted, who hate being in group settings? Because I know, I mean, I personally I've never experienced that, but like it's,
I don't understand that at all.
no, but like, you know, like what advice would you have for them? Like how does that, someone like that build community? Who it's like, there's people who, you know, it's second nature for them. It's no problem. And they're able to build community very easily. But what about those people that are, you know, more introverted, a little more shy?
I think like building community and relationship actually just happens one person at a time.
Yeah.
And so like, even for somebody who's very introverted, and I grew up feeling kind of introverted, you know, especially when it came to the people that knew me well, and like knew me, I feel like I had like a extroverted persona almost, that I was like, oh, you know, I was known for whatever, but I felt like there wasn't really many people that actually really knew me. I think even extroverted people are not going to feel comfortable being really vulnerable with 8 people in a room,
Right.
even if they know those 8 people well. Sometimes I think that knowing people well, you know, can sometimes almost be a barrier to becoming open and vulnerable with
Right.
them.
Because
right?
you're comfortable with those existing people already, and you don't want to, you're like, I've got the people I know, don't need any more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you're like, what if the thing that I share changes our relationship? You
Right.
know, that's,
Will people judge me? Yeah.
Will
Yeah.
will people judge me? Will people be like surprised that like, well, I thought he was that way. You know, I never thought he would say something like that.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, community happens one person at a time. So even if you're like not a group person, or like not a, you know, you really struggle, but there's, you know, God like provides us with 1 or 2 people sometimes, just one person in your life that you can have like a real open community with. Like, start by just talking to one person.
Yeah.
You know, and if you can talk to one person, you will actually like grow in your confidence and ability to
And
talk
ask-
to more people.
Ask God too, who's that person that I can trust, that I
Yeah.
can open up to? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of our biggest, like, I don't know, one of the exciting parts about being a youth leader is that sometimes you get to be that person, and sometimes you get to like help facilitate that happening.
Yeah.
You know, like getting to be that person that people like share and trust is like such a privilege, and it's such a treasure. It's so filling and brings me so much peace when that experience happens. Having someone share with me is like, it's like, oh yeah, all this other stuff I'm worried about doesn't matter, because this person is like experiencing this, and they had the courage to come and share with me and like ask me to pray with them, or ask me to pray for them, or even ask me for advice, or just to talk. You know, it's like having somebody like value you enough as a person to like open up and trust you is like almost a cure for anxiety in itself.
It's
right?
true. Yeah.
And
Sharing that load.
yeah. When someone shares their burden with you, it can, I don't know, it's a unique opportunity. And so like, that's kind of bringing it full circle then for me, is that like, you know, if you can build relationship with one person, you know, there's a really good chance that you'll actually like encourage or put that person in a position to like be encouraged and be like lift them up and help them to have perspective on their own life. And you'll like, I don't know, experience peace through that. Yeah.
I have an idea.
Okay.
I think when we're talking about anxiety, because we briefly discussed this a little bit before we got started too, I think it would be terrible if we didn't talk about these disasters. Cell phones. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have them with us all of the time. And so we're on all of the time, right? Anyone wants to talk to us, they can talk to us like right now.
Yeah.
And so, this morning I woke up, it's my sister's birthday, which is very exciting. And
Happy birthday, Allison.
And, I woke up and I looked at my phone and already I'm 40 minutes behind life because she'd already opened her presents and was excited about it. It was like, and then my dad's like, did you remember to text your sister? And I'm like, and then like, there's all these things and I'm like, I just woke up, right? We're on all the time, and I, work apps and whatever else. But like, if you're a teenager, I think it's so much worse. Like everyone's trying to like carry on their streaks. These things are important to us, right? Like who are you talking to? Who are you flirting with? What drama's going on in your friends? And then you're trying to do school and then you've got a show on in the background. And, I was thinking today, we really praise teenagers for their ability to multitask to these ridiculous degrees. And I'm like, I don't know that we should reward that. I don't think we should praise that. I'm like, I don't think that's good. I'm like, you guys can't focus wholly on anything to just sit in a room and be with a person or just be, right? Like, this is where I'm an introvert. I love to be by myself. I fuel up that way. I like to just like read a book or like I can sit and stare at a wall and I'll be happy. I'll be honest, and I find that stuff fueling, right? But if we're constantly being bugged, if we're constantly on, if you, always have this readiness of like, what's coming at me? What do I need to be doing? Am I 5 steps behind?
The culture set this 100% availability
Yeah, I mean,
standard.
how do you live like that and not feel anxiety?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, what was I going to say?
I'll keep talking.
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, because I love Jesus and I love how everything that he does is so opposite. I'm like, the world says, accomplish more, be on your phone more, be connected more, do more, do more, do more. And Jesus says, Sabbath. And that freaks us out. We're like, I can't unplug for a day. I can't take a day to rest. You don't know my life. You don't know the stuff I've got going on. I can't unplug. And yeah, like you're talking about like historically how our lives used to look, right, in our communities. And I think the same kind of applies to this. Like my grandparents didn't have the internet, and so they built really strong friendships with their neighbors and their church community, right? Like your families were, kind of healthy and, it was a very, maybe, but it was a different dynamic, right? Like you probably sat outside at night and listened to the birds or, I'm like, that sounds so pleasant to me when I think about life, right? I'm like, who has time for that?
Yeah.
But God asks us to take time to rest. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think, I remember... This was a few years ago. I remember it might have been you. I don't know. I heard from a pastor say something like,
was it wise?
It was wise. Yeah. Something like they were tired of hearing like people saying they didn't have time for certain things. Because like, well, you make time for Netflix. You make time for this. You make time for all these other things. And then you say you don't have time for like a devotional or praying or something like that. These things that like, you're like, hey, I'm struggling with all these things. And we're like, hey, dive into scripture. Well, I don't have time for that.
Well, we view it as it's like a task, not as a refueling.
Yeah. And I remember, and I think it was around the same time. I remember I was working as an electrician at the time. And I was trying to do like video production work on the side. And I remember there being some evenings where it's like, I just like don't have enough time to get these projects done. Like, do I need to scale back? Like, I love doing this. Like, what do I need to do? And then I remember I opened my phone and I was like on Instagram going through the like settings and stuff. And I stumbled upon like how much time on average you spend on this platform. And it was 40 minutes, which like, if that sounds like not a lot to you, that's scary because that is a lot.
Like it felt like 2 minutes.
Yeah, no. And I remember being like, that's 40 minutes a day that I could get back. And it was right around when that was starting. So I was like, okay, just going to not do social media. And so I deleted the app and then put the Bible where it was. But it was funny. It was funny. Like I had muscle memory.
Clever.
I had muscle memory. So every time I opened my phone, I'd be like talking to someone. I look down and I've got the Bible open. I'm like, what the heck? Oh, right. And so but I realized how it made me aware of how often I just instinctively opened it. And it was a lot more than I realized. Mm-hmm. Like there was a lot of, like I've got nothing to do right now, instead of like, hey, maybe doing some cleaning or spending some alone time or something. It's just like I would immediately and like just second nature, I would just go to Instagram, start scrolling.
That is such a real thing. I had to go on a mandatory pastor's retreat. All the staff had to do it. So like it was like a night or two away. And so I went away, like there was no internet, there was nothing, there was no self-service. What do you do, right? And I can't even tell you how many times, like same as you, like I physically caught myself reaching for a phone or remote that was not there.
Yeah.
I just like, too much time alone.
Yeah. I'm alone with my thoughts. This is not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then at the end of that, I was like, I had to ask myself, why do I have Instagram? Why do I have social media? And so like, I was like, okay. And it did help me refocus a bit the purpose behind why. I was like, okay, I have it so I can share what I'm up to with friends and family. I'm not here to like try and get likes. I'm not here to try and get more followers. I'm not here to just spend time scrolling and wasting time. I'm here. And so it did help me refocus the purpose behind it. And I think that was good. Like it was like, okay. And so I think hopefully it was a bit of a readjustment, a bit of realignment for like, what is this actually meant for? Because if I don't have a good reason for it, I just don't need to have it. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, if this is why I'm going to use it, then okay, maybe it's worth it.
I think that's something like, I love what you shared about it's like what Jesus shares is often so opposite to what our culture and the world tells us we have to do in order to experience success or like fulfillment. Because I love, as I've like experienced in my life, it's just like, there's like things that we call spiritual disciplines in the Bible, things like prayer, things like tithing, like giving is a spiritual discipline, giving of our money, giving of our time, or giving of our money, and then serving as like a giving up of our time, and Sabbath as like taking time for rest and reflection and remembrance, and fasting, and just like abstaining from certain things for a time. And something that I've experienced in my own life is that like when I take part in those things and do those practices, they are much more beneficial than they are challenging in the long run. And I think that our culture and like our mindset tells us right away is like, in order to become, take tithing, take giving, take money for an example, in order to become financially free and to have peace about your money and your job and like how you're well taken care of you need to make more money.
Oh, right.
And it says like, in order to experience freedom, you need to have more room. But like the practice of tithing, the practice of giving to supply the needs of people who otherwise wouldn't have their needs met, giving to the poor, giving to the work of ministry in the local church, or the work of like, changing the world in some other kind of context.
Like compassion or something.
Compassion. Yeah. We're, big organizations that are doing humanitarian organizations.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
That actually lets you experience freedom from it. I found that as I've like made it a priority in my own life to give of my finances to my church and to organizations that I really care about their mission and things that I think really need to get done in the world, that I've experienced, freedom from it. Because it's like, well, look, if I, Like I can already make room for this amount in my budget every month, and I haven't missed it. Because this is more important than anything I'm going to do with it.
Right.
It's more important than recreation. It's more important than leisure. It's, and in a way, it's more important even than my own like long-term security.
Yeah.
It's good to be a wise steward of your finances, and make sure that we are doing our best not to be a burden on others. But you experience freedom from it. Our culture tells us with relationships and with things like that, like the best thing you can experience is to have more of it. To have more will be more freedom. More of it will be more freedom. You'll get more enjoyment if you just eat more sugar or more whatever. Like if you just eat more dessert, more like stuff. And I love dessert and I love pie and all of those things. And I think they're good. But like if you never constrain yourself, you'll never really enjoy it, and to the same extent. It'll just become routine. And if you like, the way to enjoy your life and to enjoy your time is to spend all of your time that you're not like, that you don't have to spend making money for yourself. If you spend all of that other time just like strictly doing things that you really enjoy for yourself, that's how you'll experience, relaxation and rest and refreshment and fulfillment in your life. But it's just not really true. Like the more you spend time doing those things, the more that you'll find that they are less fulfilling. And I think it's things like disciplines like tithing, like giving of your finances that help you realize there's more to do with finances than just take care of myself. And things like in this context, as we're talking about like our devices and about social media and things like that, it eats up our time.
Yes.
That eats up so much of our time. We spend all our time that we're not doing something else, that we're not like have to be focused on something else, being fully distracted on these platforms, scrolling through
time.
posts
And then we can't
shorts.
sleep.
And you don't sleep because like you'll like, and I've done this where you like look up and you realize, oh yeah, it's 2 a.m. and I've been scrolling shorts on YouTube or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever for a couple hours now.
Yeah.
And I don't feel rested. I don't feel,
You just turned your
I'm
brain
not really
off.
interested. This is just what I'm doing. It's like, and it's just like, if, you'll just never experience really true like satisfaction through that.
And it comes back to the, like with that topic of like having more of things, right? Then you have more money, more of this. It comes back to that kind of idolizing things, right? Like, well, what are you actually putting your trust in?
And the control,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, if I hoard all my money, I can control it.
Yeah.
But you'll find with things in life, the more you try to control them, the less you actually can control them. It's better just to have an open hand posture and say, God, do with this what you want.
Well,
right?
that's the thing, because like God wants us to fully trust in Him. And so when you're like, yeah, no, I trust you, but I want to have enough money that I don't have to trust you with that.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you need to, and then can He trust us with
More.
that, like, right? It's like, it's that kind of that paradox. It's like, well, you have to trust that He will provide for you, that what you actually need and not what you think you need.
I have something pastoral I would like to say.
All right.
So we're thinking about anxiety. Anytime that topic comes to mind, I always think of the same verse, and I kind of want to touch on that. So in Philippians chapter 4, verses 4-7, it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." And I think it's just honestly such a beautiful section of scripture. I think sometimes when we read this, we can get stuck. It says, do not be anxious about anything. And so, I've been talking to people lately who are worried, like, is being anxious a sin? Is what I'm doing wrong? And then we're like, oh no, God's going to be mad at me if I'm anxious. And that's not what it's saying. It's saying when you're anxious, when you're experiencing that in all situations, like whatever stress you're coming up against, pray and ask God and be thankful. Like give God those things over and over and over again. And I think there's that's a key that sometimes we miss is like we're punishing ourselves about being anxious, right? But we have an opportunity because God loves us so much and wants to carry our burdens, right? Like we can give those things. We can be in communication with God. We can say, hey, I'm really struggling. And God's telling us that, right? Like we don't have to live anxiously.
Yeah.
I love, my favorite part of actually about this is something about this passage right here is something that, forget where I heard it now. But they were talking about this passage and how often we jump right to verse 6, be anxious for nothing. But that's that imperative thing that you're supposed to do is based on something else.
Yeah.
And it's the end of verse 5. Where he says the Lord is near.
Yep.
And he's near. He's right here. That's why you're not supposed to be anxious because God's right here and he just wants you to talk to him about it. He's right here. He's
ready to listen.
He's right here.
Yeah.
Like he's imminent right with you. He's within you. He's with you. He's experiencing, your experience is right alongside of him with you. And that's why you're not supposed to be anxious. It's not because being anxious is bad or because it's going to wreck you. It's like,
have you tried stopping?
Remember, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No.
That's not what that means.
It's like, remember, the most helpful person is right there. The only person who can really set you free from this and really take care of all these things that are outside of your control, right? Because that's what anxiety is. It's a response to life and our circumstances being outside our control. And being overwhelmingly out of our control, but nothing is overwhelmingly out of control for God.
And we can try to control our anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
right? That can be our new thing to control. Am I anxious now?
Am
I anxious now? Oh, I've got to get a handle on my
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, right? But it's not like that. It's cast your cares upon the Lord, right?
Yeah. God's the only one who can deal with it.
Yes.
So many of the things in our life, and especially for this generation that are causing anxiety are things that are way beyond your control. You know, you're told that I think of the messaging that goes out to this generation. It's like, well, the world's done in 20 years and there's nothing you can really do about it. And you'll probably never own a house because you'll never make enough money and you're never going to pay off your student loans and you'll never get the education. You'll never be able to retire. All the things that previous generations was you looked forward to enjoying is all that stuff is well, you're probably just not going to get it because of when you were born. And there's nothing you can do about that. And it's well, how do you respond to that but with anxiety?
Right.
Because it's well, then where do I have hope? How do I have hope in this world?
Rely on?
What can I rely on if...
Probably myself. That's probably the best person to rely on. I just rely on me.
That's right. I'm the only...
take care of myself. Yeah.
I'm the only person I can count on, and I usually can't count on myself either because I'm so anxious about being in control.
And then you're anxious about being anxious, and then you're anxious about... Yeah, it's just...
It's a spiral,
cycle.
but this is this is what breaks that spiral. It's the God of the universe, who we believe is loves you, cares for you, and is the one who's been providing you with everything all along. The reason you woke up and are still breathing is because he loves you and is generous and gracious towards you. He's right here and you can talk to him and he cares for you. Cast your cares on him because he cares for you and he's right here. Remember that. Remember that God is near, right? And then you won't be anxious. Yeah. If God is good and he's right here, then what else do you have to be afraid of?
My prayer lately has been from the Lord's Prayer. I've been focusing a lot on the first line, your kingdom come, your will be done. Because I think when I'm tempted to be overwhelmed by things or I'm I actually don't know what to do in a situation, I just think this is the best thing. I just pray with my whole heart, God, your will be done, your kingdom come, what you want over what I want. Right. So, and then it doesn't really matter what's around the corner because, if I've prayed that prayer, I really trust that God's going to lead and guide, then, it's not, and we know it's not in my control anyway. Right. So just that's been a big anxiety reducer too.
Yeah.
How do you trust God?
practice. And knowing that you're not going to get what you want all the time. We talk about God not being a genie a lot. I think sometimes we think about trusting God. We think, well, I'll trust God when I get what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll trust God when every time I pray, he responds the way that I want him to respond.
Mm-hmm.
But trusting God is bigger, I think, than our situations.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big piece that we don't have a good frame of reference for. The like, in the Bible, it talks about like the fear of the Lord. And it's like, well, why should I be afraid? Because God is good. And that's fair. Why should you be afraid if God is like, loves you and like cares for you and is gracious towards you and has made a way to have a relationship with you? Why should you be afraid? But like, there's like a part of that that's just like reverence and recognizing who he is and what he's like, that he like, God doesn't change. He's always good, and he is always gracious toward us. And I just think like to me, that's the foundation of trust, right? And when we talk about, building relationships and being able to be vulnerable, is like having that trust. And like, you can have the most trust in God because he's the most trustworthy, right? And he's the one who can actually do something about your circumstances, and he's the one who can do the right thing in your circumstances and like lead you and empower you to make the right choices. Yeah.
What are some challenges you want to give our listeners?
I would say something that I have found very helpful as maybe not as an all the time thing, but as a good practice, was to take even one day a week. I started doing like on Sundays, I would do a Sabbath from some like social media. So I would take a break from, video games, social media.
You and Julie are doing like a full on media fast right now.
Yeah. Until Easter, we're doing like a, no TV, movies, social media, stuff like that. Really limited,
just work stuff.
Booked. Yeah. Work, basically whatever you have to do for work and stuff like that is kind of it. And it's been like hard, but I've also noticed I've spent a lot more time in scripture because that's something that I'm like allowing myself to do. And it's something that's like, I'm engaged in and stuff like that. It's a helpful, positive thing in my life. And so
you're talking about just trying it once a week at least.
I'm saying that I found a great deal because I was recognizing, like you said, like, oh, here's what my screen time is at, and I'm not actually really okay with it because of how much other stuff I have to be doing.
Right.
Like other things that I think should be getting done that are not.
Right.
And here's all this time that I'm spending on this, and here's me feeling distracted and anxious about my, what I'm doing in my life. And so Julie and I talked about it, and I got so uncomfortable with the idea of like not having that in my life because I'm like that. I mean, that's me. I'm like, I spend a lot of time, on, watching YouTube videos, playing games, doing things like that.
It's not you.
But yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, but like for me, that was like that's like, what else do I have? Like I don't have any other like hobbies right now other than, I don't really have any other hobbies. So I'm like, what am I going to do with my time if I don't have this? And I thought, well, if we're going to do this for, 40 days or whatever till Easter, I would love to try it. I think I need to start doing it now.
Right.
And so I started doing once a week, and I found that right away, as soon as I started getting comfortable with that, it actually broke some of that hold of that stuff on my life. And I was actually able to make more disciplined choices for myself about how I wanted to spend my time, which I think is really positive. I think that's a Sabbath. That's what Sabbath is for. Yes. In some ways it's like, if you do everything every day and just work at whatever you're doing, that thing will have your worship and control of your life.
Yeah. You'll be less creative less, it actually takes away from what you could do.
Mm-hmm.
But like Sabbath is about like, you just have to stop, like Sabbath as it was instituted in the Old Testament is like, you have to not work this day.
Yeah.
So you have to like make plans not to work this day.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you have to like orient your time around not doing what you do every day on this day. And here's what this day is for.
And be
It's
intentional about it. But like, okay, here's something that I would normally have to make sure is done. And it needs to be done before, like say if Sunday is actually your Sabbath day, like
yeah.
this has to be done before Monday. So I'm going to make sure it's done by this day
Saturday
or something.
night.
Yeah.
So
Saturday.
or
Plan
yeah.
differently.
Yeah. You have to
Second.
plan around like not doing anything is actually your plans.
Yes.
Have you read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry?
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the greatest.
It's a great book. Highly recommend
If
it.
you hate reading, he's got really great videos up about
Yeah.
it on Right Now Media.
Yeah.
Do
The
you find somewhere
audiobook
else?
is really good too.
Oh,
He reads
it's
it himself.
so
It's really
solid.
good.
Kyle was
So
mentioning that
solid.
book to me and like he like, it,
Life-changing stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you should get a copy of that.
yeah, we'll link that in the notes or the description if you want to look that up.
Also, practical tip, find someone in your life to keep you accountable.
Yeah.
This is the beauty of Tyler is so great. It's like we call this doom scrolling. So like
Yeah.
sometimes we'll just catch each other, right? I'm just like, I'll just be doing this. And he's like, are you doom scrolling? And I'm like, oh, I am. Like you kind of just get stuck. You don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so I say the same thing to him. I'm like, I'm like, are you doom scrolling? And we're like, we have to keep each other accountable because sometimes it's, I don't know, you're almost in a trance, right?
Yeah,
You're just like,
absolutely.
I'm going to scroll this and I don't know how long. You just get stuck. So
Yeah.
I think accountability is key. Like find somebody who can call you out on it or check in or like, hey, get off your phone.
There's a really, and now as we're talking about phones makes it more challenging, but there's a really good app that actually a friend of mine sent to me called Habit Share. And it's just super simple. You can't really do anything on it other than like you make habits, whether they're daily or weekly or monthly or whatever. And you can set them up so that like, and then you share that habit, your progress on that habit with someone automatically. So like as soon as you go in and check off your days or whatever, that gets sent over. So someone can like check up on you. So it's like almost like passive accountability. If you're like
Nice.
somebody who struggles to like remember to text someone every day what you did or didn't do. And it's just like, it's really, really helpful. I've really helpful. And that was really helpful for me in doing this like weekly media Sabbath. And now this, longer term everyday thing for the next little while here. So I think there's some great tools like that. And, communities like we have at our youth group here is
Yes.
a great
Join
opportunity
a
to find
small
somebody.
group.
Yeah.
And, you can do it. You can actually take a break from these things, even if it's just to try and see if it helps.
Yeah.
And you can push through that fear of missing out. Like,
Yeah.
oh no, what if I miss something important? I'm like, you won't.
Yeah.
really
It's
won't.
all
If
the
it's
same.
really that
Yeah.
important, someone will contact
fine.
you. Yeah.
Or you can catch it on Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Denver, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Denver.
Appreciate
Great
it.
to be here.
Thanks for your words of wisdom. We'll link Whispering Pines Camp if you guys want to learn more about
Sure.
what they're doing out there. A great place to get away
Yes.
and get away from everything. If you are in the southern Alberta area, you can even apply for, should I say that? Apply for staff positions.
Yeah,
There's
you can
some,
be a part of our
Maybe.
team for the summer.
Yeah,
We do summer
yeah.
camps. So
you could just take like a Sabbath for a few months.
that's
I mean, you'll still work.
Sabbath is not a great description
Kids
for
are
what
A
exhausting.
media.
media, a media fast.
There we go.
Yeah,
media
fast.
Yeah, media Sabbath.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Thanks, Denver.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.